All right. Hey, the mic is working. Hello, everybody. Good day, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Dice, our interactive D&D podcast stream thing. Today, we're going to talk about a couple of different things while working on a couple of projects. Hello, Ashley and Alex. Good day. So today we're going to be continuing a couple different conversation threads. One about races, and a little bit more about NPCs. And I'm also going to be working on making a couple of NPCs for the live Dungeons and Dragons gameplay series I'm going to be doing with my D&D group here in the near future. Jim Smashley and my wife Heather. So last week was a special episode. All three of them were on here, and we talked about the beginnings of what were going to be their characters. But I'm going to run two NPCs in that group as well to kind of round it out. I have some ideas for a story that I'm going to run for them, and going to need a bigger party. So I'm going to need a bigger boat. I still have a few bites left of my dinner. I'm going to be sneaking in here and there as well. So try not to judge me too hard for that. So first things first, thanks for coming. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you've not had a chance, Mergedworlds, which is my Dungeons and Dragons story series, is streamed here every other Thursday, and also available for free as an audio podcast on both iTunes and Spotify. It is available there if you're interested. Again, under the name Mergedworlds, all one word, MERGEDWORLDS. All right. Just a question. How long will this stream be? Normally 2 to 2.5 hours. This stream in Mergedworlds, I try to keep between 2 and 2.5 hours, especially with the Mergedworlds itself, because the longer episodes I've been advised are a little bit harder for some people to catch up on, who are just using the audio side of it. So I'm trying to keep them closer to 2 hours. If this one runs a smidge over, I'm not worried about it since it's not going to audio. All right, let me find my question. So I've been sent a couple of questions from folks watching Behind the Dice who wanted me to touch on a few different things, and we're gonna talk about some of that today. I'm going to start there specifically. The question comes from our friend Paul, who says he watches a lot of D&D shows, and players seem to have just a fetish and desire for half-blood characters. So I wanted to kind of touch on half-race characters, because I've already got a few in Merged World, potentially more in the future. So that's something that, I've never really touched upon. And I realized I never really touched upon the races of Merged. And so we're going to kind of cover some of that first before I even start working on characters. Some of the things Paul wanted to know specifically is what are age differences, example of a half-elf with two, with different parents. What are their age limits? How quickly do they mature? Things of that nature. Is there a combination that would live longer? Whether the parent was male elf versus the female elf, would that affect age range? Things of that nature. And which races don't mix? Are there races that can't bear children? And it gives a great example. You never hear of any half-orc, half-elves, or half-minotaur, half-dwarves. So, great examples. So, it was a great question. He gave it to me a couple of weeks ago. I was going to do this last week, but then we did the live one instead. So, I'm excited to finally get to touch on those. A lot of that covered just in the question is pretty much almost the answer. Half races do have some nifty perks. You're correct, Ashley. One of the good things about half races is you get some of the perks of both races without as many of the negatives in many ways, with exceptions. So the most common half race is always going to be half elf, half human, half elf, and from just a personal opinion, lore stand of view, I would say it's because they're the most physically comparative. Humans and elves aren't that far in height. Most of the time, depending on the world you're in, can be relatively close in the myriad of different skin colors they can have, going from pale all the way to dark. Elves can sometimes have bluish and green tinges, depending on the world you're playing with. In Merged World, pretty much every color. I had someone ask me, are there black elves that aren't drow? And at this point, I don't have any. I've never had anyone ask to play one. I'm not against the concept, but by nature, normally that's drow themselves. Hopefully, for those of you tuning into the story, learn drow just by nature doesn't automatically make you evil. But being an elf of the dark side, normally drow is what it is. In some worlds, like the Dragonlance setting, a drow elf is considered a dark elf. A dark elf being someone who's fallen from the light. They look just like any other regular elf, paler skin and such, but they're one who've gone to evil. So evil mages, evil clerics, an elf that turned to one of those would normally be cast out. No regular elf community is going to let an evil elven wizard hang out. So that's what they refer to as a dark elf. But a dark elf and a drow elf are technically two different. So are there other combinations? Sure. Half orc would probably be the second most common one you see, and that is human and orc combination. In Dragonlance again, gnomes and minotaurs have gnomes and dwarves have outlawed, both communities have, the mixing of the two races. Because that's what a gully dwarf is. A gully dwarf is a half gnome, half gnome, half minotaur. Oh god, I'm spilling over. Half gnome, half dwarf is what a gully dwarf technically is supposed to be. On Merged Worlds, while they share the same name and some of the characteristics of gully dwarves, I don't play them from that standpoint. They are their own race of dwarves. They've always on Merged Worlds they always have. They still share a lot of the same physical characteristics, but not completely. Gully dwarves are very often are drawn to be kind of fat and squat, and I don't think that gully dwarves in my world have to be. Gully dwarves on Merged Worlds version of them that they do share is that they're usually naturally of lower intelligence. They have an intelligence cap. There's only so smart a gully dwarf supposedly. And that's a big one. They have an intelligence issue. And the flip side of that is they have, probably of almost any race, one of the strongest survival instincts. Element, right? A gully dwarf can survive in places and on food and liquids that most races wouldn't even consider. In many cities where gully dwarves are found, they're found living in sewers and alleys. They're known as a trash race for two reasons. One, they have no problem digging through a trash can, pulling out a half-eaten sandwich, and just starting munching. Doesn't bother them. At the same time, they're considered a trash race because most other races consider them trash, and some will actively move to just destroy them because they're viewed as rats in communities. But on Merged Worlds, all that same mentality exists for gully dwarves. Naturally low intelligence. They're pretty small. They're actually a smidge taller than gnomes. They're supposed to be a bit taller than gnomes. Of course, their heights can range a little bit in a gambit, just like dwarves and gnomes and elves and humans can as well. But gully dwarves, their biggest negative is their inability to have a high intelligence. There are exceptions to every rule, I'm sure. Eventually, something like that could happen, but overall, that's the common. But they will survive in places people won't. That's why somewhere like New Gully, which is in Merged Worlds, which is the post-apocalyptic version of New York, where everything is just destroyed, that's a perfect place for them. for scroungers, that the amount of stuff they'll come across is horrendous, right? It'd be nothing for them. If you remember in the Merged World early story, King Fig, they scrounge up gems and jewelry and gold and silver rings, diamonds. I mean, you can imagine that's everywhere in a city, right? Find an old jewelry store that's crashed. You probably find, what we would consider $1 million in gold and diamond gems. They'll put in a bag and trade for a week's worth of food to feed the people, So that type of stuff would have no value to a gully dwarf. That's not to say they won't find something shiny and pretty and that be their lucky thing. Oh, I found a shiny ring, I'm going to hang on to it. Or I found a pretty rock, I'm going to hang on to it. But from a monetary point of view, it's more wealth and power comes in gully dwarf society more from the ability to lead and have ideas, slightly higher intelligence. Sorry. Are there races that can't merge? Oh yeah, sure. There's some animals, and I would say that just even looking at our own world, there are animals that can't breed with other animals. You know what I mean? Probably not going to find a half horse, half cat anywhere running around, regardless of how big the cat was. Some genetic DNA just does not mix. And Minotaur Dwarf is a good example. I would have no intention of ever allowing a half Minotaur, half Dwarf. Someone who really wanted that normally is going to be trying to min-max their stats and get the best of both worlds. But some of those race combinations I wouldn't. Elves, on the other hand, seem to be the only race that they can breed with other than elves is humans. Because orcs and goblins, hobgoblins. I'm trying to think of a way of approaching this politely. A large amount of half-blooded characters are the result of a violent I can't even think of the word for it. Usually it's rape. I mean, that's almost how it is. Even in most of the books, if you read a fantasy novel and there's a half elf, in almost every situation, it was a male human who raped them or raped you. It's the most common history that you find for a half elf. Not always, of course, and a lot of people creating your own characters that way. But when you actually read fiction, it's almost always something of that nature. Michael asks, so what would be a good class for a gully dwarf as a character? Well, right off the bat, there's no race anywhere that can't be a fighter. Any race can play a fighter. It's literally just learning how to hit or cut things with a weapon. Doesn't mean you're going to have a lot of perks or specs to it, but a gully dwarf could very easily be a fighter. When it comes to strength, they're just as strong as a gnome, and a gnome can be a fighter. Like I said, they're slightly larger than a gnome. So a gully dwarf could very easily be a warrior. It's the strategy part of fighting that they would have a problem with. You give them a weapon and tell them to go hit things with a stick or hit things with a hammer or a pole. Yes, you're not going to find a lot of gully dwarves who are going to be fencing masters with a sword, parrying and such, you don't, I don't mean this to be insulting to anybody who does archery. You don't have to have a high intelligence to shoot a bow. You know what I mean? You don't have to have a high intelligence to throw a knife real well. These are skills that are hand-eye coordination and physical skills, but it doesn't require you to be, college student to throw a knife, So rogue would be the second class that I would say a gully dwarf would easily fall into. Although some of the traditional thief skills, I would up and down the skills. So still have to figure out thief skills in 5th edition, but in 2nd edition, there's a list of thief skills that all thieves have. Find and remove traps, pick locks, search for secret doors, read language, move silently, hide in shadows, pickpockets, stuff like that, climb walls. Some of the traditional thief skills, I would say that a gully dwarf rogue would never have. Picking locks and disarming traps are the two things that I think would require at least an adequate intelligence to do. So where I would take those skills away from a gully dwarf who wanted to play a rogue, I would give them additional points and skills in move silently, hide in shadows. They're scroungers. They're used to having to try to hide in plain sight and stay out of people's way just so that somebody walking by doesn't hurt them just because they're there. And on Merged Worlds, Gully Dwarves very much have that issue. There are a lot of people who wouldn't consider themselves evil people and wouldn't do evil acts in any other situation that just out of nature wouldn't think twice besides hurting or eliminating a gully dwarf, because many of them view them as pests, rats. And I mean, gully dwarves, like a rat, the gully dwarf community does have the ability to, because the way they live, to spread disease from place to another. I mean, that's feasibly possible. But for a rogue, I would give them hide in shadows and move silently, and maybe even climbing skills. You know, there's several skills that I would definitely give a gully dwarf additional bonuses. So gully dwarves in Merge World's a big one. I'm touching on them a lot just because it's not something I get to talk about. But I've got a few things the way I've considered gully dwarves. Like I said, the way they are scroungers and such. I don't see them. They're definitely never going to be a mage. You're not going to have a mage. The intelligence requires me to high. You could have a cleric. I could see a gully dwarf being a cleric of some certain religions, right? Because if someone has the right mindset and the right alignment and soul, and no reason a god can't say, "Hey, I pick you, gully dwarf, to be a cleric of healing." Do you have to have some type of intelligence to cast spells? Yes, but since clerics more heavily rely on wisdom, and the conduit is truly through your holy symbol and such. I have a bit of a headache. I'm sorry I'm rubbing my face so much. I've been dealing with headache the last few days. But I could see them being a cleric of something. You know, I can't really see a gully dwarf being a cleric of death. You know what I mean? Although there are evil gully dwarfs. I mean, there are gully dwarfs who are turds. I mean, any race can have good and bad. Proven time and time again. But I'm touching on gully dwarves a lot. So gully dwarves, yes, I could go that route with them. Super easy. I think a gully dwarf could easily be a bard. I can't think of any reason in the world why a gully dwarf, whether you look scrungy or not, can't have an awesome singing voice or storytelling ability. I think a bard would be a great example of a gully dwarf rogue, because they don't have all the traditional rogue skills as well. Second edition, fifth I'm learning. But the focus could be on singing or even playing a basic instrument like drums or when I say flute, I don't mean the flute like we have with all the craziness, but just like a 4 or 5 flute. You know, just a couple of holes, like more like a recorder, I guess people would call it. A gully could learn to play something like that, but more often than not, they would sing, right? So there's no reason that a gully dwarf can't have a beautiful voice. So bard could be feasibly capable of being a class. But things like that, and there's probably others from a case-to-case basis, but definitely I do not think that you'd ever find a gully dwarf mate. I think that's just going to be beyond the capability of any gully. So can there be half humans, half dwarfs? Yes, there can. In fact, Piccolo. Oh yeah, it's Piccolo. That's what that's called. Thank you very much, sir. Or even a pan flute. That thing, I could see one playing something like that. I could see that a gully dwarf could put together that kind of instrument with the different tubes. Except drums to me, you could definitely do something with drums. But there are half human, half dwarves. You don't find them in most of the D&D fantasy settings. In fact, the only one they were traditionally in was the Dark Sun series. And they were called muls, M-U-L. And they were very, very highly sought after because it's not a common birth. It can happen, but it's much more rare than, say, a half-elf. But they have the strength of a dwarf with a bit more of the agility of a human. They're height-wise a mixture between the two. They're incredibly high constitution, survivability, and health. Humans already have a pretty decent one just by default, and dwarves are even better. The one thing about a mul is mul's bodies are completely hairless. They have no eyebrows, no facial hair, no hair, armpits, none of it. Their muls, by tradition, are completely hairless. They're very sought after for gladiatorial arenas because they're amazing fighters. So a half human, half dwarf, I would allow very easily on Merged Worlds. I don't think I'd go quite the mul view on it. For capabilities, stat-wise, potentially, but I'd be fine if they wanted some hair. I wouldn't make them have to be completely hairless if they didn't want to. But yeah, half dwarves will happen. But again, that's a human-dwarf combo. I've never seen an example of a dwarf, an elf, or anything like that. So one example that's happened on my world that I don't know if it's ever happened. At least it's never happened in fantasy or like in actual Dragonlance or anything. But that's the half Kender. Petal is a half Kender. So human and Kender together can happen, but again, it's a very rare happening. Not only just the science behind it, it's a rare conception, but it's also rare that a human and an Kender would get together again under positive circumstances. It's more likely going to be the other way. But yeah, half Kender I'm fine with. I could do that. I've been thinking for a while, could a Minotaur and an Ogre have a child? It may sound odd to you. But when it comes to traditional Dungeons and Dragons, on several of the worlds, it is implied that Minotaurs are eventually an offshoot of ogres. And again, my knowledge, I've read a lot of the different D&D novels from across the series, but I've read nearly every Dragonlance novel that's ever come out. And ogres were the first race, and they were beautiful until they were corrupted. And Minotaurs were an offshoot of ogres. So I might consider a Minotaur-Ogre combo. For physical size, they're close. They're almost equal. In fact, if anything, an ogre might be a bit bigger. A born vampire and an elf. Yes. Seraph is also a half-breed. That's correct. And to be honest, technically, he's not even a half-breed. He's less than that, or more than that, because Draven is a half-breed. Because he's the son of a born vampire and a demon. So, and there's another interesting thing. And that's where tieflings come from. Technically, depending on modern versus old, a tiefling was normally a half human, half demon. And then I think it just became its own race. Currently, I believe it's just its own race. But early on, sometimes tieflings were considered what happened if a demon, commonly a succubus, got with a human. But yes, there are some things that could work. Like Draven could have got with a human and probably had a kid easily. So demons themselves have interbred into so many different additional types of demon types. And there are several different creatures which are demons bred with something. But when it comes to like the traditional races, could a dwarf and a gully dwarf get together? Yes. Could a gnome and a gully dwarf get together? Yes. Again, the chance of any of them having kids is next to nothing. because it's not a common birth rate. But is it possible? Size-wise, yes. A gnome and a dwarf, I would shy away from. I've never seen an example of it. I'm not completely against it. If someone can give me a good scenario, like someone who's creating a character and they're like, here's the scenario, how and why this would work out. I'm always happy to entertain the conversation as long as we can justify it and it works well for the story. But I've never had a situation where I put a gnome and a dwarf together. Very often, gnomes are raised by dwarves. That happens a lot in fantasy, where dwarf takes in a gnome, and Fig was one of those. It was a gnome that was raised by dwarves, and that's why he fought and acted more like a dwarf, even though he was a gnome. And then on top of that, we throw in the last, what I would consider the common races, and that is your halfling, right? Dragonlance doesn't have halflings. That's what Kender were. It was their own custom halfling. But halflings exist, obviously. There's been halflings in the story in Mergedworlds, so they exist as well. And halflings could get with humans. They could get with Kender. I could put a halfling with a gnome, a gully dwarf, maybe even a dwarf. For what you're looking at, because again, a lot of it for me is physical size. You know what I mean? You're not going to find a gnome and a minotaur getting together, or a Kender and a minotaur getting together. It's just too weird. But, you know, there could be some thoughts. So I'm willing to entertain almost any concept if we can justify how it happened and what made it work. And that's, again, one of the biggest benefits of Merged Worlds is I can do pretty much anything I want. Because all I have to say is, well, there was a world where this happened. You know? And so that part of that world came through to the new Merged Worlds. So it gives me, and some people would say probably a cop-out. I don't have to be held to a lot of rules. But I think that is, for me, I find it more of a challenge because it's harder for me to say no. Because using that same philosophy, a player could be like, well, why can't there be a world where that worked? You know, so again, I'm open to most concepts. It would just be a couple of things. If I can tell the reason you want to do it is because you're trying to power game, min-max a character, I'm not going to. If I think you love the idea of role-playing that character, and you have a whole the way that characters quirks and such, and you just want to play the character regardless of what power they have, I'm probably a little more likely to throw you that character. Michael asks, how about a human and a fae, like a nymph? Sure, 100%. I would have no problem with that. It would just have to be, you know, again, the right situation. And that's the thing. It's one of those things where two humans getting together, there's not a 100% chance you're going to have a kid. That's just life, right? Even if the two of you, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you medically, it just might not happen. Or might happen every freaking year, you know? But some people, it just works out that way. There is a luck of the draw scenario in every situation. And the weirder the combo, the less of a chance it can happen. So getting a half Kender, much, much smaller chance, you know, where a human and a Kender could be sexually active without any form of protection for their whole lives and never have a kid. It's for conception to take place, there has to be normally circumstance and a percentage linked to it. And that's kind of how I would create the characters. And that also has to carry over to how many of them there are in the world, right? If there is a 0.05% chance that you could become a half Kender, then that means 0.5% of all Kender could be a half Kender. And I would put it that way because humans always outnumber everybody else. There's always more humans than elves, more humans than dwarves, more humans than anybody. Humans are the disease race that take over everything, right? So it would really be based more on the secondary races section of it. But then we'll step into the one half race that I hate the most, but many people are nowadays is considered a common character, and that's Dragonborn. Despise the entire concept personally. Don't like it. I wasn't there. I'm not saying this is fact. But when I look at a Dragonborn, I see a character race that was created by somebody who wanted to be more powerful than the races that were available. These races aren't powerful enough. I want something stronger. It's a min-maxer. It's a power gaming concept. It's the type of race or class that normally comes out of those type of D&D sessions that I've seen. When people come to me and they talk to me about the cool, weird race they came up with, or the cool, weird class they come up with, and I'm like, okay, well, what's everybody else in the group? And it's also weird, huge, combinations of multiple powers and such. I'm like, I'm never surprised. That's usually the group that comes. Rarely are you going to find 2 elves, a dwarf, a halfling, and a dragon. Someone tells me they have a dragonborn in their party. There's usually at least several other wacky-do races, classes, and does that make it bad? No. If you and your friends are having fun, that's all that matters. D&D is group to group. But for me personally, I don't like Dragonborn. I have, at this point, no intention of having Dragonborn. It is a DNA combination that does not work. So that is not something I would ever... Again, 99% sure. Always got to leave a window of 1% there, because you never know what I'm going to think of tomorrow. You got to be open to it possibly could happen. Hey, what's up, Terry Grievous? Haven't seen you in a while, man. How you doing? But if I had to pick a race I like the least. All right. So I think I touched on all the majority of the half-elf stuff. Now, one of the other questions, you're not open to them? Understandable. You're good. You're good. One of the other questions that came with this is age ranges. Is it more common to be what race? Tyler from Dow. Oh, hey, how's it going? Good day. Historically. Oh, I moved to Twitch. You don't like their format? Understandable. I still stream here on Sundays and Thursdays. But yeah, Twitch, unfortunately, just gave so much more opportunity and ability to interact and give things to the community that just don't exist on YouTube yet. But I'll never abandon YouTube. Still home, by all means. All my D&D content will always be on YouTube. My live stream D&D, anything D&D will always be YouTube. That will never show up on Twitch, with the exception of a D&D themed video game like Baldur's Gate or something. But any role-playing content will always be here. So when it comes to race-gender combos, historically, again, anything that's half human, it's almost always a male that was the human part, right? Female elf, male human. Especially in situations where it was a negative or violent encounter, it's almost always a human male. That's basing things on traditional fantasy and the writing and stuff and the reading that I've done. On Merged Worlds, doesn't have to be. There are even half-elf communities on Merged World. Never popped one up in a story, but I've always known there were going to be some. So I wouldn't have any reason to believe why half-elves, who are not accepted very many times by neither race, humans or elves, wouldn't bind together to build their own community. And therein lies an interesting question, and something I've discussed with groups in the past. If a half-elf and a half-elf have a kid, is it a half-elf? Yes, it is. If you had a community of 100 half elves and they grew to a city of 1,000 half elves and they only bred together, everybody's still a half elf. You're taking the exact same percentages together every single time. Everyone born to 2 half elves is a half elf. So, of all of the different mixing of the blood races, a half elf community, I think, would be the most common. If you're going to find a community of just half bloods, I'd say half elves are probably what you're. Let's see here. LOCM, MT, what's up? Talking about races. So I had some questions about the mixing of races and how I view those, how they work, and especially how they work on merged worlds. That's kind of what we've been talking about today, so far, anyways. But like I said, there's a couple that I just don't like that at this point I have no intention of putting. The closest to a Dragonborn that existed on my world is Dragonlance has a creature called Draconians. Draconians are where evil clerics took the eggs of good dragons and perverted them and hatched them into basically adult humanoid-sized creatures, most of which were a little bit bigger than humans. And the type of dragon egg determined what type of draconian they were. And only one of them could fly, although most of them had wings. The auric draconians, which were gold from gold eggs, they didn't, but they were the only ones that were wizards. And all the draconians, my favorite thing about draconians is that when a draconian dies, something happens. The most common draconian, Baz draconians, when they die, they turn to stone instantly. So many a sword has been trapped inside of a statue because you run somebody through. There's one where that turns their bones they turn to acid. There's one where it polymorphs to look exactly like the person who killed it. And then auric draconians, which are the wizard draconians, those are awesome because they turn into a flaming ball of fire that shoots small fireballs until it takes 20 additional points of damage. Yes, draconians are in the new Fizban's book. That doesn't surprise me, because definitely Dragonlance. I mean, Fizban is a Dragonlance, I'm assuming Dragonlance-based book, since Fizban is Paladin, the god of good in Dragonlance. But yeah, they're monsters in traditional D&D as well. And they're in all of the regular second edition monster compendiums and all the Dragonlance guides. I've got all that stuff. So for second edition, I use them all the time. I've left them out of a lot of the retelling of Merged Worlds just because I didn't want to confuse people who weren't familiar with Dragonlance. Or even people who just play D&D who aren't familiar with Dragonlance. So, let's see. Right, but it's Fizban's Draconomicon, correct? And Fizban is a Dragonlance character. Just like Elminster is a Forgotten Realms character. But most Elminster books had stuff from all the different worlds in them. But Fizban is the Elminster of Dragonlance, who's actually the god of good in disguise. Sorry if I ruined a book that came out in 1988 for you. Anybody out there, yeah. But yeah. So that's the closest I come to Dragonborn. Now, as for the villain races, I'd merge some of those together. It's very possible you could come across, like I said, a half orc, half goblin, hobgoblin orc combo. I mean, I wouldn't care to throw some of that stuff together if I could find a good reason to do it. You know, maybe a leader of a large community of them, bigger and stronger because it's merged with that, you know. Half orc is historically orc and human, but I have no problem putting a half orc and an ogre together. Not comfortable, but by God, a half orc or half ogre being another race that is not that uncommon in Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. So there's that. Now, touching on that, those were some of the questions I got about mixed races, and I wanted to touch on those today. Now, going a little bit further then, in what races can you find on Merged Worlds? Nearly everything else. I can't think of any other races I've come across that I banned from Merged Worlds at this point. I'm always finding new things to bring in there. Raven came from that. But I'm always coming across fantasy stuff, and not just Dungeons and Dragons, but other novels or stuff that I think would be a cool character or a cool race, or you could find a way to make it a race. So there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody co-ops everybody. Every time. Fantasy. Everybody took Tolkien. After that, everybody else just borrowed from each other. So, yeah. I think that's most of the main I could think of that. So, I was chatting today with one of my moderators, Miss Panda, and her husband, because the raffle I ran a couple months ago to create your own, or to create a character for Merged Worlds, an NPC that I'll be bringing in later. I got together. It was actually her husband who won, and he listens to Merged Worlds. That's the only content I believe that I have that he's into. Maybe this stuff too, the behind the dice. I'm not sure, but he's almost caught up on the story. So I met with them just a little while ago to design a character for Merged Worlds. And I had an inkling idea of what he was wanting to do. And it just opened up a huge doorway of story for me that I got really excited about. And so we talked about the character, and he's going to come up with a few things that he, fill in the blank, what kind of weapons he uses, things like that. But the character is going to, what I originally was, you create an NPC, I'll throw him in for an episode, it'll be a funny thing. This could very well be a larger character to the story than I originally planned. So pretty excited about that. So working on that there. Let's see. Tyler says, I'm working on a homebrew setting. Also, could you rip off a planet and put it into demi-plane and chain to the elemental planes in the shadow field? Okay, gotcha. There were a few Dungeons and Dragons worlds that had short runs that didn't do well, but introduced some really interesting races and classes. I try to slide some of them in. Spelljammer being a great example of one. The Gith is basically an incredibly heavy Minotaur-like creature, but instead of a cow-based creature, it's a hippopotamus-based creature who uses guns, kind of. Very cool race, and worked out well. There's some definitely interesting races in that. Birthright had some very interesting concepts of how a shadow plane worked, and how halflings are some of the only ones that can find the doorways to get to the shadow worlds. It was a cool skill and ability to give the halflings of the races that were available. But Birthright didn't last real long. Al-Qadim didn't last real long. Sadly, because some of them, like Dark Sun, it lasted longer than most of those, but still, comparatively, Greyhawk, Dragonlance, Forgotten Realms being number one, and Ravenloft have really been the primary worlds for the long time. And even Dragonlance hasn't been getting much in the way of D&D stuff, even though it's mentioned from the beginning of 5th edition. For an example, if you have a 5th edition player's handbook, when you're creating your character, it gives examples of 2 characters. And one of them is a character from Forgotten Realms, and the other one is Tika Whalen, who is a character from the very first 3 Dragonlance. So they reference Dragonlance from the beginning of 5th edition's first book. But they haven't come up with a lot of just Dragonlance-based material for it yet. So the the Fizbin one was the first one I saw, which really had Dragonlance-themed stuff. I'm not sure if I've seen anything that actually has Kender in it yet. They might be out there, but I don't remember finding any specs for Kender in 5th edition yet. It would have to be in a side book, not in Player's Handbook. Yeah. So, while I've talked about races and that, classes are kind of the same way. I'm open to almost any class. Big little star symbol next to the almost. Not a huge fan of the Artificer. Talked about that before. It's bringing a little bit too much sci-fi into my fantasy. Again, if we can find a way to make it work, I'm willing to give it a shot. I'll be honest, I know much less about the Artificer than I do anything else. Like, I know quite a bit about Dragonborn. Right on them. Don't know much about Artificers. What little I've seen, it's basically steampunk D&D, and if I want that, I'll play Shadowrun. They still make Shadowrun? I have old Shadowrun stuff. That was some of the earliest sci-fi / D&D stuff I remember playing. But now there's all sorts of weird races out there. Jim is going to be playing a Toidle, of all things, which is a turtle-like creature. I'm interested to see how that works. Oh, it's going to be fun. So, I need to roll a couple of characters. Or get them started, right? Let me grab some. Player's Handbook. Character sheets. Nothing on the back of the character sheet? Confused. I've got a character sheet that has nothing on the back, and I have character sheets that have stuff on the back. I don't have a lot of 5th edition character sheets filled out for NPC. A lot of it I've been winging just under 2nd edition concepts. Do I roll? No. NPCs get whatever I want them to have. I'm creating them to be something specific. So I do not normally roll stats for NPCs. I give them what I need to be, what I need them to be. Again, always exceptions to any rule. So I'm going to create 2 characters for this group that I'm going to be playing. Let's talk about that, shall we? Some of you who know more about 5th than I do, probably going to be helpful with this, right? I don't know a lot about 5th yet. Still learning. And it's because of that that I'm going to be rolling some stuff I'm less knowledgeable about. So I'm going to be rolling a thief, and I'm going to be rolling an artificer. Well, I'm not what I know of, not a huge fan of an artificer. I want to at least give it a fair shot. Dragonborn, I've given shot. They existed before 5th edition. 5th edition just made them mainstream. Do you think Tony is a dumb name for my turtle? Jim asks. I'm on the fence between that or one of the Ninja Turtle names. Just don't know which one would be better. Man, whatever you like. I'm going to say this. You're asking if Tony would be a dumb name, and you're thinking about going with a Ninja Turtle. Are any of them dumb names? No. You like them and you're having fun with them. It legitimately doesn't matter. When it comes to things like names and stuff, my limitations are limited. You know, you're not naming your character Sex Lord the Wonder Penis. I mean, I'm just not going to let that happen, you know. But one of the early characters in a side group I had years ago was a halfling warrior named Bob. Bob was funny as shit. Bob's the one who got that sword I talked about that slowly changes your alignment to turn you into a paladin. That was Bob the Halfling who was being turned into a paladin. It was played by the little brother of the young lady who played Dandy and Mercy. When I say little brother, he was like 16, 17. I mean, he was still an adult, but younger than her. So I'm going to be doing an artificer, and I'm going to do a rogue. Because we haven't had a rogue in 5th yet, and I'd like to see how some of the 5th stuff works. So I'm going to start with the rogue, because I feel... Excuse me. Apologize. I feel that a rogue will be the more straightforward, because I know more about rogues. So the rogue should be relatively easy to make. The question I'm throwing at myself now is, what race do I want to make the rogue? Now, our party has a tiefling, a half-elf, and a turtle. Not a lot of the normal races in there already. So I'm going to go with at least one of the standard races. I was leaning towards halfling for a rogue, because that's pretty traditional. And I have no idea what I'm going to do with the artificer. I don't know enough about him. So we'll go that way out in a minute. But I'm thinking I'm going to go with a classic halfling. I'm sorry, wood elf, not half elf. I knew there was something else before elf. I apologize. Wood elf, not half elf. Yes, we have a wood elf. So I think I'm going to do a halfling. So let me grab the basic halfling stuff. Let's see. Anything I care about. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about this character as I'm doing this. Because some of the things, not completely sure about. And I'd love to hear you guys step in if I'm saying something slightly incorrect. So I do like that it offers potential names to give you an idea. That's a nice thing that the book does now. It didn't really offer that much before. Family names, it's nice that they offer that. That's pretty good. Ability scores. Charisma increases by 1. So that's something I've noticed from 5th edition. And unless I'm wrong, all of the stat bonuses like that are bonuses. Let's see. Ability scores. Strength, I'm looking at Dragonborn. Strength by 2, charisma by 1. So in 2nd edition, every race you got a plus and a minus. Because every race has a perk, but there's also a negative for taking that race. Strong, they're not as fast, they're not as whatever. So 5th edition, it looks like it, again, it's taken away all the bad stuff and just given only good. But a halfling, it would appear, gets a charisma score. Fine. Naturally stealthy. You can attempt to hide even when you're obscured only by a creature that is at least one size larger than you. That's fine. So that's the halfling traits. Oh, and then there's a stout. Oh, that's a lightfoot. Lightfoot and stout. Oh, I like that they've split those up. Okay, cool. So I'm going to take a halfling. Let me write that down before I forget. And it is a level 1 rogue. Not rouge. Everybody spells rogue wrong. Drives me crazy. More prone to wanderlust. Makes them very Kender-like. These halflings are hair feet or tall feathers. Let's see. Halfling traits. Ability scores, your dexterity score increases by 2. So you get that on top of that. Let me reread this again. So halflings get a bonus dexterity of 2 and a charisma of 1 if they're a lightfoot. They live to be 150-ish years old. Lawful good. As a rule, they are good-hearted and kind. Hate to see others. I'm fine with that. 3 feet, weigh about 40 pounds. Understandable. Base walking speed's 25. I'm sure that's important somehow. When you roll a 1 on a d20 for an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, you can re-roll the die and must use the new roll. Interesting. That takes away the fun of the critical fumble, though. I have custom critical hit and critical fumble dice. So when you roll a 1, like Jim did today on the first combat roll of this entire adventure, and he rolled fall and he fell. The options are fall, drop weapon, break weapon, hit self, hit ally, or knock yourself unconscious. That's the fun of a 1. I'd have to think on that. It's an adequate perk. And I mean, and it only works 5% of the time. Is one of those two. So yeah, you get a 2 to dexterity, and I would get a 1 to charisma. Okay. Let me switch over to rogue and see what the classes don't have ability requirements anymore, do they? So I haven't found them. Used to be a chart. You had to have this stat and this stat in order to even have a character. Paladin being the best example. You had to have a 17 charisma to be a paladin. You actually had to have 4 different class requirements. Creating a rogue. Okay. Roguish archetypes. Well, not even to that yet. I guess we'll have to look at that in a minute. Still roll a 1 on their second chance. Yeah, that's a much, much smaller percentage. Rolling 2 1s in a row. Possible. Let's see. Yes, a shady living, creating a rogue. That's what I'm doing. Quick build. I don't like that. Hit points. 1d8 per rogue level. That's your hit dice. Which I have to figure out how they use hit dice in this game, because I'm not sure how hit dice come into play. 8 plus your constitution modifier. 1d8 or 5 plus your constitution. Armor, light armor. So that hurts. So rogues can wear armor now. Okay. Simple weapons. Hand crossbows, long swords, rapiers, short swords. That seems fine. Tools. Thieves' tools. That's understandable. Skill. Choose 4. Okay. Acrobatics, athletics, deception, insight, intimidation, investigation, perception, performance, persuasion, sleight of hand, and stealth. Now, I haven't read any of those, but I feel like I can make a educated guess on which one each was. So I'm going to take acrobatics. I guess you just fill in the little circle on the character sheet. Let me do that. I'm going to assume that the space next to it is for your modifier, because modifiers are a thing everywhere now, it seems. Acrobatics, I like. Sleight of hand, I definitely want. Don't even know what it does, but I can tell you I want that, and I want stealth. And I get 1 more. I don't feel that I'd be very intimidating as a half-elf. I could be wrong. But I think I will take athletics. That seems something useful. There's my 4 skills. I have chosen my skills. Equipment. Start the following equipment. In addition to the equipment granted by your background. Oh yeah, that's a thing. Proud about background. A rapier or a short sword, a short bow, and quiver of 20 arrows or short bow. Wait a minute. a rapier or a short sword, a short bow and quiver of 20 arrows, or a short sword. Why is it giving me short sword twice as an option? That's weird. A burglar's pack, a dungeoneer's pack, or an explorer's pack. Oh, I get to choose one from each option, I guess. I can take a short sword twice. Leather armor, 2 daggers, and thieves' tools. Well, the equipment confuses me. Am I supposed to take one out of every bullet point? Or am I supposed to pick a bullet point and choose one? Doesn't say. I'll come back to that. Expertise. There's 2 of your skill proficiencies, or 1 of your skill proficiencies, and your proficiency with thieves' tool. Proficiency bonus is doubled for any ability check you make that uses either of the chosen proficiency. Okay. What are proficiencies in 5th edition? Where do I find what proficiencies are? Those are skills, so what's proficiency? There's 2 of your skill proficiency. Doesn't list what the options are. I guess I'll go back. Maybe it's at the beginning of the section. Nope, it just goes directly into barbarian. Well, that doesn't help. Let's see. Well, it's telling me I need to choose my proficiencies, but it doesn't tell me what the game considers proficiencies. It also doesn't tell me where I would find a list of proficiencies. Okay, let me go back to the back here and see if it's listed somewhere in the proficiency. Again, I said this last episode. The 5th edition book, when it comes to creating a character, is like a choose-your-own-adventure novel. There's just, you can't just read it in order and create a character. All right, so proficiencies does not exist. Proficiencies, wait, here we go. 11, 12, 14, and 155. Because those sound like they pages right next to each other. 11, 12, 14, and 155. Okay. Go back to 11. Choose a race. Choose a class. Character part. You also gain a number of proficiencies. Armor, weapons, skills, saving throws, and sometimes tools. Your proficiencies define many of the things your character can do particularly well from using certain weapons or telling command. On your character sheet, record all the features that your class gives you at first level. So it says you gain a number of proficiencies, but it doesn't tell you where you find the proficiencies. Let me check the next page. 11, 12. Proficiency bonus. Well, that's great if I knew what the proficiency was to give it a bonus to. Table that appears in your class description shows your proficiency bonus. Many of the numbers you'll be recording on your character sheet. Attack rolls, ability check, saving throw. Class determines your weapon proficiency, saving throw skills, and some of your skill and tool proficiency. It gives you additional skill. Can't be added to. This is talking a lot about proficiencies without actually telling you what they are. There's proficiency bonus. It says your class determines what your proficiencies are, but I don't see anywhere in the class where it lists proficiencies. Okay, so it's 11, 12, 14. Let me jump over and see if it's on page 14. Abilities. Is that proficiencies, or is that the same? Is that something different? Dexterity, constitution, building Bruner, starting equipment, gold pieces. Didn't say that there. What was the other page? 155. Hold on. You flip all the way back to 155. Mounts and vehicles and vehicle proficiencies. Pretty sure that's not what I'm looking for. All right. So what I've learned is that I get proficiencies at first level, but I'm supposed to guess at what they are or make them up out of my own mind. The good news is at 6th level, I get to choose 2 more proficiencies that I don't know what they are. I'm looking in case it's on this page and I'm just missing it. Give me a moment. Did I skip it maybe? Back here? There's proficiency bonus. I found proficiency bonuses. It says I get proficiencies, I get skill proficiencies. But nowhere does it say what a skill is. Let's see, we got somebody chatted here. Tyler says. But what, okay, are the skills you're good at? Where do I find the list of skills I get to choose from? Because the only table here says proficiency bonus, sneak attack, and features. It doesn't say anything about skills or proficiencies. Right, but what skills do I get to choose from? A skill. Okay, but it's saying that. So the skills are your proficiency. So they're the exact same thing. They're just using 2 different words on different pages. So skills are proficiencies. Proficiencies are skills. Okay. I'm confused why they call them proficiencies on the 2nd page. Choose 2 of your skills then. So that's what it should have said. Choose 2 of your skills. Or 1 of your skills and your proficiency with thieves' tools. Does it say I have a proficiency with thieves' tools? It didn't say I had a skill of thieves' tools anywhere. It says tools, I have thieves' tools, but it doesn't actually say that I have a skill that's thieves' tools. Is what your Excel's at. Okay. So when it's telling me to choose proficiencies, where do I find the proficiencies that I would choose? First level, choose 2 of your skill proficiencies, or 1 of your skill proficiency, and your proficiency with thieves' tools. So far, nowhere tells me I have a proficiency with thieves' tools. If that's something I should have written down, it did not tell me I had a skill with thieves' tools. It doesn't list that as an actual ability anywhere. This is, for someone who would be walking into the game without having someone who knows how it works, this book does not tell you shit. Is the problem I'm having. It's, again, I've got 33 years under my belt of DMing, and I don't understand half of the things that are written here. So are skills and proficiencies different things? If so, what's a skill proficiency? Is that a 3rd thing or a combination of the first 2? Which skills count as proficiencies? Which proficiencies count as skills? And where do I find a proficiency with thieves' tool that doesn't exist under the list of skills? Those would be the questions I'm looking to answer. Proficiencies are categories like weapons, tools, and skills. So this entire section is a... So automatically, I already know how to use all simple weapons, hand crossbows, long swords, rapiers, and short swords. So at first level, I can use, like, depending on what they base simple weapons, 17 different weapons at level 1. Dark, the dagger, comma, dart. I mean, depending, of course, what they base single, what they consider simple weapons. Hopefully there's a list of those somewhere. So light armor, whatever the game classifies as light armor, and I'm sure that's in the armor section. I haven't been to that yet, but I'm sure that's in there. That part I'm not worried about. I'm sure they have to explain which armors are light armors. And hopefully somewhere it says what simple weapons are, because I would think that a short sword would count as a simple weapon, but it's listed separately, so it must not be considered a simple weapon. But I can use hand crossbows, long swords, rapiers, short swords, and all simple weapons. That's a lot of weapon skills to know out of the gate. For comparison, in 2nd edition, a thief gets to pick 2. There are 2 weapons you know how to use out of the gate, because you spent what few years you have training learning to master those 2 weapons. So I guess somewhere on here I have to write down every one of these weapons. Okay. So is there a section for skills or proficiencies? Other proficiencies and languages. I guess that's what that goes. So light armor is a proficiency. Okay, let me write that down. Simple weapons is a proficiency. Hopefully that list will be a little bit further on in the book. Hand crossbows. Long swords. I'd be interested to see how they qualify what a long sword is. Rapiers. And short sword. And then under tools, it says thieves' tools. So I'm guessing that's a skill and not equipment that I have. So I will write thieves' tools. Saving throws are dexterity and intelligence. Is there a place for saving throws? There they are. Saving throws are dexterity and intelligence. So I only ever use dexterity or intelligence? I have to figure that out. Well, the only thing with that title is and this is just coming from a standpoint, if they provide me a guide of how to create characters, and to do it, I need an app, that makes this a piece of trash. I mean, if they've given me a whole book to create characters, which, and an app is what you should use instead, that doesn't give me a lot of confidence for the guides they're providing. Okay, so equipment, I can, again, this is a test character. It's an NPC for me, so I'm trying to build it the way, because eventually I'm going to have to show other people how to create characters or figure out what things I allow on characters in Merged Worlds. So trying to figure out how this process works so I can understand it a little bit. The PHB is trash. Well, I would, what I've seen, yes. Again, it's a choose-your-own-adventure novel. I'm bouncing all over the place. The issue that I'm having is not so much with the guides of it, but just the whole setup process. All right, so expertise. So that's different than skills or proficiencies. At first level, choose 2 of your skill proficiencies. I guess that's the acrobatics, athletics, sleight of hand, and stealth. I pick those 4 things. So pick 2 of those, or one of them and my skill and thief skills. Your proficiency bonus is doubled for any ability check you make that uses either of those chosen proficiencies. And maybe you can help me with this part, because I'm about to ask one of the questions that has confused me the most about 5th edition. how do I know what I have to roll for a saving throw? And by that, do I mean, depending on the situation, is there a chart or list of what number I would have to roll based on a situation? Or does the DM just get to guess and pull a number out of his ass and say, here, roll this? So far, playing 5th, that's what I've done. But I don't know if that's right, because I can't find anything. I'm used to having a chart of skills. 2nd edition. Polymorph spells, you have to have this. Petrify, magic wands, magic items, spells themselves, electricity, fire. There's a list of them. So my question there is, how do I know as a DM what number to tell them they have to roll? Because I'm not seeing much. Maybe that's in the DMG and I've missed it. I'll admit I've spent a little less time in the DMG. So I'm not sure. So anyways, that's a question. How do I as the DM know if I want them to make a dexterity check or saving throw? So maybe a dragon's going to breathe fire on their ass. And I need to say, make a saving throw against this dragon breathing fire on your ass. What number would I tell them to roll? Like, we'll give that as a specific example. Is there a chart that says breath weapon? 2nd edition, it said breath weapon, rogue, level 6. This is the number you have to roll over. So I guess I'm looking for a chart that tells me what to tell them they have to roll based on their level and skill set and maybe class. Does that exist, or do I just make it up? That's probably the primary question. Okay. So after that, we'll move on. Well, waiting on an answer on that. Sneak attack. Beginning of 1st level, you know how to strike subtly and exploit a foe's distraction. Once per turn. I'm going to have to interrupt myself again. What is a turn in 5th edition? Normally it's stated in the monster's stat block, a DC check of this. Okay, so in the actual monster manual, which again, I admit I've been trying to figure out the player's handbook. I'm still trying to learn the DMG and the monster manual. Although I will say the monster manual art is phenomenal. The art in all of these books is a huge upgrade from anything I've seen before. Beautiful art, hands down. I'll say that. Can't argue that at all. The art is phenomenal, and the books are just more sturdily made. The old ones fell apart all the damn time. Stat block, a DC check. DC. What's DC stand for, please? Usually there would be given a DC for the dragon's breath weapon on the dragon. For that, I would need to know what a DC is. D&D Beyond? It's better? Okay, I can look into that. Is a DC a difficulty check? Is that different than a saving throw? Again, it's hard because I'm coming out of I know so much of one version that I'm trying to convert that knowledge into the current system. And that's probably very limiting to me looking at this. I'm sure that the fact that I have such a specific way ingrained into the way that I play, that I'm trying to find that somewhere in this book or the equivalent. So that's very much a limitation on my part, and I accept that. In no way am I saying my way is better. I just know that way. So, give you an example. This is the saving throw chart in 2nd edition. It lists your class, your level, and what you have to roll over in a specific situation. If you're a level 1 to 3 priest, you have to roll over a 10 for paralyzation, poison, or death magic, over a 14 for magic from a rod, staff, or wand, over 13 for anything that's petrification or polymorph, over 16 for breath weapon, or 15 for spells. Those numbers drop as you level up. So as a DM, all I have to say is, make a saving throw versus spell. You look at your character sheet, you're level 4, you know you need a 14 or above, plus any bonuses. So that's what a saving throw is to me. So a difficulty check sounds very different. If I cast a spell at you, a saving throw would be your potential way of being immune to it or getting out of the way or something of that nature. How hard is it to open a door? Is it a D-check of 1? Roll a dice, and if you get a 1 or higher, you can open the door. It's happening to you that you need to save yourself from. Dragon's Breath attack. Yes. That's 16. You roll above 16, your saving throw mod is your ability mod. Your ability mod. DC for magic is set by the caster or level of spell. I'm following that, but I'm also getting the fact that you're saying that there's no comprehensive place to find this. I have to go to a completely different spot to find that information based on the thing that I'm looking for at the time. So I have to either pull up the spell, find the level of the caster, and then calculate what it would be. If I need it from a monster, it's going to be listed in their skill block. I'm assuming a block of skills specifically. There's not just a page where I can go to and it says, for breath weapons, roll over a 12. So you just make one up. Okay. That was kind of my early question. Is there a comprehensive list somewhere, or do you just pull it out of your ass? Because it seems it would be very difficult to go from one D&D group to another, where a DM says this is a 15, but the other DM says it's a 6 for the same exact thing. I feel like it would be very hard to have a consistency across groups. I can't imagine going to like a convention and playing with others. Okay. So the sneak attack thing, let's see here. You once per turn. Is there a page that talks about time conversion and how long a turn is? It could. I may not have seen it yet. Again, I've only looked through some of the DMG. I've been focusing mostly on Player's Handbook. Because it's always been my assumption, a player with a Player's Handbook should be able to create their character as is. So, is there a time conversion chart, and how long is a turn? That would be my current question. You don't need advantage on the attack. I still don't understand the whole advantage thing. If another enemy the target is within 5 feet, that part makes sense. Enemy isn't incapacitated, and you don't have disadvantage on the attack. If you would have advantage, you don't have disadvantage. I mean, that would make sense. It's hard to have advantage and disadvantage at the same time. The amount of the extra damage increases as you gain levels in this class, as shown on the sneak attack column of the rogue table. Now, I did see that, so that's good. It gives us a chart right there telling us how we have as we level up. Turn is your spot in what's indicative. The game has a DC 24 for a fireball. You have to roll higher than that, including your reflex save bonus. There's a reflex save bonus? Hang on a minute. I don't have that under saving throws. I just have the regular 6 stats. Turn is 6 seconds. A round is when everyone takes a turn. Okay, all right. Wait. So a turn is shorter than a round? Is that correct? Am I reading that right? Not during stream, unfortunately, not. No. Oh, no, you're fine. I just want to make sure I'm following. Cause I want to make sure I'm following. You're fine. Wasn't mocking you. I just want to make sure I'm following the right words here. Again, to give you an idea of where I'm coming from, in second edition, a round is everybody doing their thing, everybody getting to do their thing. A turn is 10 rounds. So if I cast a spell that is a turn, it lasts for 10 cycles of everybody having a round. Since everybody's 6 seconds takes place at the exact same time, because I don't think somebody's waiting for me to take my attack before they take theirs, then a round is still also 6 seconds then, would it not? If a turn is 6 seconds and everybody gets the same 6 seconds, a round would also be 6 seconds. Except a round is everybody's 6 seconds, where a turn sounds like it's an individual 6 seconds. Does that sound accurate? So when I say I'm taking a turn, that's my 6 seconds. And when I say a round, that's everybody's 6 seconds. Around, some abilities reset, and on a turn, other abilities. But they both last 6 seconds. Hence, I'm confused. Because while you have a party order and people take their party order, everybody's action takes place in the same time period. Right? If there are 10 people in the battle and everybody gets 6 seconds, it doesn't take 60 seconds for all of that to happen. Everybody's 6 seconds happens at the same time. So the amount of time that a round and a turn lasts on a clock would be the same. So a spell that lasts a round or a turn would both last 6 seconds. If you're just looking at basic time on a clock. A round is but everybody shares the same 6 seconds. Right? So if it's my turn to attack at precisely midnight, my turn to finish attacking is midnight and 6 seconds. The other 10 monsters are also done at midnight at 6 seconds. Right, now that I get. If it says a minute, if it says time, then yes, I would. If somebody says a minute, that's 10 rounds. I agree 100% on that. But a spell that lasts a round or a turn would be the same amount of time. It's still 6 seconds, right? But it all starts over when the pitcher throws the ball. I would agree. But if I have 5 monsters on my side and you have 5 heroes on your side, my 5 monsters aren't going to wait to swing their sword until he swings his sword, and then he swings his sword, and he casts a spell, and then he swings his sword, and then he swings his sword. Earl, it's your turn. He swings his sword. He swings his sword. Now it's my sword, his sword, his sword. 60 seconds have gone by. In combat, we're all swinging our swords at the same time. From a realistic time point of view, on a clock, it all happens in that same 6 seconds. So if a spell says it lasts a round, or if a spell says it lasts a turn, it's the exact same amount of time, 10 seconds. Now, something that lasts a minute, that'd be very different. Because then, like you said, that's 10 rounds or turns to me. Okay. You can interrupt someone's turn. It's called a reaction. So, hypothetically, you're saying that in the 3rd second of your 6 seconds, it stops the thing that I'm doing in my 6 seconds, because my thing was happening on the 5th second of the 6th second. So initiative, which I would agree with, means that the things you're doing happen during the 6 seconds a little bit quicker than mine, which would make sense from a spell casting point of view. If it takes you 6 whole seconds to cast your spell, and I punch you in the mouth on the 3rd second, you're probably not going to get to finish your spell. That to me, at that point, it becomes initiative, which makes sense to me, whether you do individual initiative or party initiative. I don't know if 5th edition only does one or the other, but I always play party initiative. It's just easier. So I think that'd be the case. A little bit quicker. All right, Michael. So here's the question I have with you. So I cast a spell that lasts... Okay, you say cast a spell that is a turn, only lasts your turn, which means it lasts 6 seconds, correct? But if so, that's the same 6 seconds that everybody else is sharing. So as soon as my 6 second ends, my next 6 seconds automatically begins. There's no space between my 6 seconds in a combat. 6 seconds, 12 seconds mean we've all taken 2 turns. So if I cast a spell 6 seconds, everybody else's 6 seconds is happening at the same time. So basically, almost any spell that's around, or 6 second spell, is an instantaneous spell. Because it's going to go off and be done at the end of 6 seconds, which, to be honest, is not that long. You do it as turns, though, like Final Fantasy. Right, and that's how we roll it as well. The concept being that if I roll initiative, then we're going a little bit quicker or getting the jump on you and things of that nature. But that's how we roll it. But from a how things are resolved, is kind of how we do it. I guess oddly enough, as much as I hate to bring math into something because I hate math, it's like algebra. So if I win initiative and I do enough damage to kill you, you don't get to still take the attack on the same 6 seconds that we're both living in. It means at second 2 of 6, I stabbed you through the heart, which means when you were going to swing your sword at 4 of 6 seconds, you don't get to now, because I moved faster within my 6 seconds. Each action itself should not always take 6 seconds, because if so, everybody's actions would always happen at the exact same time. Just 6 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you've ever seen somebody sword fight in a movie, we would have hit blades 5 to 8 times in that 6 seconds. Tap, 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 tap. I believe the assumption is that during those, I got a stab through your defense before you get your stab through my defense. If I do enough to kill you, you don't get to then take your turn on the defense. Would be my assumption, if we're following it from a timeline clock point of view. Let's see. I've done things like what you're saying, where I ask a player what they do, they roll, and I don't describe it, but at the end I go through everything that happens, like a movement. Yeah, I've done that as well, too, especially when there's a lot going on at once. I do that a lot, too. You can do 3 things on a turn. So you can do 3 things in 6 seconds. I would hope that you would physically, as a person, be able to do those 3 things by the time you counted to 6. It's move, action, bonus, action. That means you have feasibly 2 seconds. 1, 2. That's how long you have to do the first thing. 3, 4, 5, 6. You have 2 seconds per thing you do. Attack, dodge, dash. Probably take a couple steps in 2 seconds. Again, it doesn't make sense. I see. Thank you, Michael, for 3 months. Appreciate that, sir. Pleasure to have you. Then you, sir, are the Flash. I just made Floki on D&D and Beyond, and it's accurate of what we did. It just doesn't explain in detail certain things. The other things, it is gave me 15 hit points instead of the 9 I started with. Well, are you level 2 now, though, or did you roll them as level 1? I can attack or cast a spell in a few seconds. I would agree. I could attack or cast a spell in a few seconds. There's no way in the world I could run 30 feet from a standing position in 2 seconds. That's Olympian or beyond. Moving 30 feet in 2 seconds is almost not feasible. Yeah, now that I remember. You get a set amount of hit points at level 1. You get a specific. Well, I mean, it's saying I think he's saying at level 1 it let him roll hit points and gave him 15. Does it just let you roll as many times as you want? But my character can. That's the part where as a DM I would tell you no, your character can. There's no way in the world, unless you have something magical or a spell cast upon you, that you're going to, from a stopped position, move 30 feet in 2 seconds. And still have time to attack or do whatever else you can do in that same 6 seconds. That's right. Yeah, you started with 9. And I think it was 8 plus, you got a +1 for whatever stat bonus you had, if I remember, Jim. Homebrew is a turn is 10 seconds. 10 seconds is what we used in 2nd edition as well. Yeah. Jim, Floki is a gnome monk. It's the first character he rolled. Much as I hate to say it, the more I get into 5th edition, the more I dislike it. They've taken away so many of the choices and made it generic. And they've taken all the skills and abilities and overpowered them to the point that they're unrealistic, even in a world with magic. Jim's a gnome monk. Cunning action. Thieves can't make sense. I don't need to read that. Your quick thinking and agility allow you to move and act quickly. You can take a bonus action on each of your turns in combat. So I get to take an extra run of 30 feet in 6 seconds. I don't know if I'm reading that. You can take a bonus action on each of your turns in combat. So you said you can do 3 things, and then they get an extra one. So that's 4 things that they get to do with cunning action. But the 4th thing has to be dash, disengage, or hide action. Okay. Roguish archetype. At 3rd level, you choose an archetype that you emulate in the exercise. Emulate in the Thief, Assassin, Arcane Trickster. All details at the end of class description. That choice grants you features at 3rd level, then 9/3. Oh, so that's additional character flair. I like that. I look forward to reading that. Wait. Prized on hit points. Gotcha. Potentially. But for rogues, it's a bonus action. So you can attack, move, and bonus action dash. Maybe I'm not reading dash. Dash isn't the 30 feet thing in 2 seconds. Dash is something specific. Because dash could be in here and I haven't seen what dash is yet. I haven't seen anything that describes the ability dash. So I may have just not got to that part yet. So that makes sense if I haven't read what a dash is. I'll reserve judgment till I figure out what that is. Ability score improvement. When you reach 4th level, and again 8, 10, 12, 16, and 19, you can increase 1 ability score of your choice by 2. Or you can increase 2 ability scores by 1. You can increase your ability scores above 20. That makes sense. That I'm fine with. I'm good there. Dash is a double move. Dash is 60 feet in 2 seconds. It's insane. Starting at 5th level, when an attacker that you can see hits you with an attack, you can use your reaction to have the attack's damage against you. That makes sense. You're dodging it. That totally makes sense. Similarly, you can nimbly dodge out of the way of certain area effects, such as a red dragon's fiery breath or an ice storm's effect that allows you to make a dexterity saving throw. It only have damage. You instead take no damage. That's pretty clear cut. The evasion skill, I got that. Reliable talent. At 11th level, you have refined your chosen skills till they approach perfection. Whenever you make an ability check that lets you add your proficiency bonus, you can treat a d20 roll of 9 or lower as a 10. If I roll a 1, it counts as a 10. All the time. Fifth is based on a 5-foot grid. Okay. So that means I can go 12 grid spaces in 2 seconds with the dash ability. The chosen skills, right. Yeah, that part I got, but that's 4 things that never roll a 1. Blind sense. Starting from the level, if you're able to hear, you're aware of the location of any hidden or invisible creature within 10 feet. I like that. That's new. I think that's a good ability. Baby's first tabletop. Wow, I don't think I've ever heard a better description of it. What's up, Paul? Sir, the whole first half of this episode was talking about your questions, man. I look forward to hearing what your thoughts on it were. I didn't get to it last week because we end up switching and doing the live one with Jim and Smashley and my wife. But you'll find a lot of information about your questions in the first 45 minutes to an hour. Move 30 feet, action. Move 30 feet and bonus action and dash through. That's 90 feet in 6 seconds? Ones are always ones, and there's absolutely no exception as a DM I would ever put to that. Any skill or ability that lets your 1 not be a 1 is negated immediately. Because it doesn't matter how good or perfect you are at something, there's always a chance you will fail. Same as if I have to roll a 52 on a 20-sided to hit you, 20 is automatically a success. Because it doesn't matter how bad you are at something, there's always the chance you can succeed. Unless you're hasted spell, then you can get another action. Wow, I genuinely feel really, really bad. By the way, right. Yeah. Cut all the hair off, right? Cut all the hair off. Yeah, as much as I hate to say it, because I really, really try not to be a quitter type person. But 5th edition is just horrid in almost every facet. I think I'm going to go back to 2nd edition. I may take some of the things in 5th that I do like and bring them into 2nd, but I'm 99% sure I'm going to go back to doing 2nd edition. It's I think that 5th edition is designed for power gamers. It's designed for min-maxers. And it's funny, now that we're talking about this, I've seen so many funny little skits online, and there's a dude on TikTok that I follow who's the nicest human being and the funniest D&D content creator I've ever come across. And if you don't follow him on TikTok, I'm not a TikTok person normally, but Mr. MR Kurt Kurt Wise has just he's the nicest human being. He's a huge proponent of just a good community. Highly recommend checking him out on TikTok. His stuff's all D&D based, pretty much. It's phenomenal. You've always wanted to play second. Second edition is what I've run for 30 years, really. I mean, I started with first and then switched to second almost immediately because I started playing in 88 when Dragonlance first came out. Dragon's Bottom Twilight in 88. That's how my friend Mike and I found D&D. Mike found it first. He was playing for like good 6 to 8 months before I ever played. Second edition, just, yeah. Jim Smashley, if I was to say, hey, these are beautiful books that I have, I'm gonna stick these in a box and never look at them again. Hey, would you like your new second edition character sheet? How would you feel about that? Jim, obviously you're playing a monk, and monk's a whole different world in second. We can still continue to make your monk work. I'm not going to take away anything you've got. But when it comes to overall just understanding, we spend so much time playing D&D trying to figure out how we're supposed to do what we're doing that it pulls us out of the game and it pulls us out of the story. And I'll be honest with you, as a DM, if you can run 60 to 90 feet in 2 seconds, I don't even say 6 seconds, from a standing position, that is just not a feasibility that I can write into a story that is going to make any sense. I have a hard enough time trying to figure out Jim's jumping. Jesus Christ, as a monk, he's the Incredible Hulk, jumping from, county to county at a time at some points. No. And that's the thing. It's not you guys by any means. I've been struggling with this for like 6 or 8 months now. Almost a year. Have we not been playing, Jim? Almost a year. Well, that's just it. The classes you guys picked, because you got what? A mage? You guys picked a mage. You picked a hunter. And what did my wife pick? Hang on, what did she pick? She picked a druid. All of those exist in second edition, and I guarantee you're going to like what I do with them. Oh, yeah, don't burn it. No, hang on to it. There are some things I found in here that I like. Again, I will say that the very, very best thing that I've ever pulled out of 5th edition is cantrips. Cantrips are wonderful. I love cantrips. In 2nd edition, there are no cantrips. So a first level mage gets to cast 1 spell 1 time a day. That's it. You cast your 1 spell, and you better hope you can throw a dagger or have a sling, because you're useless for the rest of the day. So being able to have cantrips, lower level spells, some of them, the ones that cause damage still bother me a little bit. I don't think you should have unlimited damaging spells for free. But I think that if you're a mage and you've trained for 6 years, and now you're 18 or 19 years old and you're going out on a quest, you're going to know more than 1 spell. That's just silly. But cantrips are phenomenal. I hate the way they've done the rest of spells in 5th edition. I don't like that wizard spells and cleric spells aren't technically separate things now. So cantrips I'll keep. In 2nd edition, cantrip was a spell, and it didn't do crap. You can make little illusions, make coins disappear, little stuff like that. It's funny. Oatmeal cream pies, please don't make me redo spell casting. I just figured it out. No, spell casting we've already converted to 2nd edition. You're fine. That's already what 2nd edition is. How I do 2nd edition, so you don't have to do anything different with magic. You get the cantrips, and the way we're doing 2nd edition, that's how I already did it anyways. So you're totally good. Yeah, spell casting's exactly the same. If anything, you're just gonna be looking in a 2nd edition player's handbook. In fact, you're gonna get more spells, because with the player's handbook, 2nd edition has way more spells for clerics right out of the gate, and it also has way more spells for when you throw in the Tome of Magic. You have 5 times the spells you have right now. Let's see. Slings are useless in 5th edition. Another thing that makes me sad. In 2nd edition, if you're a monk, if you're a wizard or if you are a cleric, you wear robes. That's it. You wear robes. There's no armor. There's no shield. There's no bladed weapons other than a dagger. Wear robes. Mixing in 5th and 2nd. Yeah, I think that's just going to be better for us. I think it would be better to... I know... I feel really bad because I'm about to say something that's going to sound very egotistical. And I won't lie and say I'm not proud of it, but I'm not making it up. I've played D&D with many groups over the years, including groups and people who played 5th edition. I have never had a person I've played D&D with who didn't come back to me afterwards and say, I like the way you play it more. Even people who started in 5th edition are like, I like the way you do 2nd better. Because like you said, I've changed a ton of stuff in 2nd and removed the trash from it too. Every series has trash in it. I've just had 33 years of weeding out the trash. So I've narrowed it down to the stuff that works well for group. It's funny. Last week I had someone offer to pay me to be a DM again. It's always flattering. I've never done that. I've never accepted money to be a DM. But somebody really wanted me to run an adventure on Mergedworlds for them and their friends. I didn't even know. I barely knew the person, but it was flattering. It's nice to get asked that. Robes with pants. I'm fine. You can wear pants under your robes. The spell slots. So I don't like as a cleric. I don't like that you have to pick your spells ahead of time. And I don't do that. As a cleric, you can cast any spell that you have access to as that cleric. As many times as you have spell points. You can cast 3 first level spells. You can cast the same one 3 times. Cast 3 different ones. There's no way for me to know what spells I'm going to need that day. And my spells are being given to me by a god. Sure as hell would think he would know what spells I'm going to need better than I know what spells I'm going to need for the next day. He or she. I should take that back. So, whoever... Wizards, a little bit... I don't do it like that either. Wizards, you memorize your spells. You then have your spell points. You can cast 4 first level spells. You can cast any of your first level spells. The thing in 2nd edition is you have spell caps. So how many spells of a level you can know is based on your intelligence. So if you have a 16 intelligence, you can only know 9 spells of any given level. So if you find a spell book, you're like, here's 3 awesome first level spells. But I've only got 3 spots left for first level spells. Which of these is good enough that I want to know it all the time? You know? Oh, you're subbing to me? I appreciate that. Thank you very much. 24 for charity. I'm definitely going to do... I did a 24-hour charity stream for Extra Life on Twitch a couple weeks ago. Actually, it was last weekend, I think. Wasn't it? Yes. Last weekend before. And I'm going to... There's a tabletop day for Extra Life. I'm hoping to do something with the community. That's, I want to say, around summer every year. So I'm hoping next year to do something with that. Right, exactly. I agree 100% on the cleric. A cleric, now in 2nd edition, there's something called spell spheres. So there's things like weather, sun, light. There's things like that. And based on what god you worship, it tells you what spheres you have access to. And you can cast any spell in that sphere of a level that you can cast. And there's always things called bonus spells. Bonus spells are spells that you get because your god says, and you can have these ones. They're usually ones that don't fall within the spheres that you have access to. Every single prayer, but at the end of your 2nd casting, you might be too tired. Okay. Extra Life. Hell yeah. Extra Life. This was my 3rd year running Extra Life. Last year and this year I did 24 hours. The very first year I did a 12-hour because I'd only been streaming for like 2 weeks. But I started streaming so I could do Extra Life. And then people kept coming back and I kept streaming. I stream over on Twitch 6 days a week and I stream here twice a week. Thursday's D&D day. And every other Thursday is Behind the Dice. A day like this, we talk about D&D. I talk about my world. And then the other weekends are Merged Worlds. I've been writing and running the same homebrew D&D world story for over 30 years. So I'm telling that story. It's also an audio podcast and such, but yeah. Let's see here. Which one was going over the ears? The Fears for Charity was narrating a speed run. That's nice. See, that's awesome. I love stuff like that. You had domain. Okay, so I can show you. So imagine if, okay, in the second edition Player's Handbook, there's a section that's just wizard spells, and there's a section that's just cleric spells. And almost none of those spells overlap. Detect evil, detect good, a couple things like that. Detect magic, dispel magic. But 95% of the spells that are wizard spells, a cleric can't cast and vice versa. Okay? Then, cleric spells are broken into categories. These are light spells. These are illusion spells. These are weather spells. And there's 12 things, except they're called spheres instead of categories. So if I worship a god of light, the spheres or the sections of spells I have access to are going to be ones based on life. One of them is necromancy, and that's healing, for the record. Necromancy is healing. Cure light wounds, cure serious wounds. Those are necromancy. So if you're a healing cleric, you're definitely going to have necromancy. But you may not have combat spells. There's actually a section called war spells, which there's not many. You may not have plant spells. That's more you're going to find under a nature or a druid one. So it's broken into these categories, and what god you have determines what spells you get. I have my own complete pantheon of gods. I've been running for years. I have all the spheres broken down by base, including bow spells plus bonus abilities. There'll be just a little bit of tweaking for my friends who are playing with me now, but overall it's going to be basically the same. But you can cast that spell as many times as you want. You have spell classes, necromancy. Okay, and wizards have those exact situations. So all of the spheres that are in 5th edition were traditionally just the wizard ones. And then clerics had their own completely different section. And cleric spells only went to level 7, while wizard spells could go up to level 9. And the rate that they gained those spells were different. And so different stuff like that. Like, because I have my own pantheon of gods, you can say, okay, what spell spheres does the god of nature have? And I'll list them off. There's a thing about majoring and minoring in spheres. I'm not going to bring that up because that's way too complicated without going through the beginnings. But overall, you're like, okay, cool. I can open up this book, look at all the weather spells, and I know I can cast 1st and 2nd level spells. So I can cast any of the 1st or 2nd level spells on this page. I can do any one in plants, anyone in light. I don't get necromancy because I'm a war druid or whatever. And I don't get any in sun for whatever reason. So you just know these are the lists that I can choose out of. And you can cast as many as you'd like. So that's kind of how. I like to use a spell point system. So again, if you're 1st level and you have 1 spell point, you can cast 1 spell. That sucks. Cantrips I like. Totally bring in cantrips over to 2nd edition because that is a huge improvement and makes more sense. Because she's the god of water? Potentially. I'll give you an idea of what the spheres are real quick. Just so you kind of know what I'm talking about. So, priest spheres fall under these categories. Well, as soon as I turn to the priest page. Wizards. It's so nice. Okay. So, priest spells. I looked at a page and then closed the book like an idiot. All right, priest spells. So there's one called All. There's only like 5 spells in it. Everybody gets that one. Animal, Astral, Charm, Combat, creation, divination, elemental, guardian, healing, necromantic, plant, protection, summoning, sun, and weather. So those are all of the different spheres. Once you add in the Tome of Magic, you also get war and time. But the Tome of Magic is what introduced wild magic, which is its own whole fun thing to do. Let's see. It's made to be broken and made into right. Goes to your world. It will rule the world with Eldritch Blast. If a warlock comes to my world, his magic wouldn't work. Might not let me cast fire because I'm the god of water. I mean, it's odd because there's usually there's not like a fire one. Normally that falls under weather or element. And sometimes it's diametrically opposed. If you're the god if you worship the god of water, which I don't have one, but if there was a god of just water, they probably wouldn't be happy with you playing with fire, to be honest. If you want to play it, I mean, if you worship water, love water, and all about water, and the goddess of water, and she catches you casting fire spells, she might be pretty pissed about that. But normally the gods aren't quite that specific. Like a god of healing, god of light, god of nature, god of the seas, god of business and trade, god of magic, god of the dragons, god of the mountain, god of war, god of truth, god of lies and deception. So, those things allow you to dabble into a whole bunch of different stuff. Warlocks don't exist in 2nd edition. A warlock isn't a thing. There are kits. So the way kits work in 2nd edition is I've got the Wizard's Handbook, the Priest's Handbook, the Rogue's Handbook, the Barbarian's Handbook. And inside of those are kits which you can add to a traditional role that give you some perks, like different abilities and skills, kind of like you get from some of the stuff in 5th edition. But for every perk, you get a con. You're getting something at the cost of losing something else. It's a way of making sure it stays balanced. And it doesn't do a super job. Usually the perks are way better than what you're losing, so it's not that big of a deal. So it still can break it a little bit. But in 2nd edition, even the ability scores, if you're a dwarf, you gain Constitution, you lose Wisdom. I'm just picking that. I don't know if that's the specifics. But you gain 2 in this, you lose 1 in that. You gain 1 in this, you lose 1 in that. Or you gain 1 in this, and lose 1 in this, 1 in this. But something about you is the opposite. You're not as pretty as an elf. So you lose 2 to charisma as a minotaur. But boy, God, do you get a +4 to strength, And in 2nd edition, the ability scores go up to 25. And strength is its own monstrosity. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I agree with you 100%, Tyler. Going through the book, I can't find any negatives. There's nothing that takes away. It's just give you more until you're basically just a walking armory. And I think that takes it away. To me, and I'll tell you why I think that happened. I'll go on Draven gets deep and emotional for this. It's because it was bought by Wizard of the Coast. 2nd edition, TSR. 5th edition, Wizards of the Coast. 2nd edition existed for over 20 years. And in the last 15, we've had 3, 3.5, 4, and 5. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number 1, it's the sanctioning concept. I used to play Magic the Gathering. Loved Magic the Gathering. Played it for years. And then they came out with sanctioning. Official tournaments where you could have scores and such. And when you play a sanctioned match, you can only use the 3 most recent booster packs that have come out. This forces you to buy new cards. And the cards that you paid all that money for before, 9 times out of 10, become wasted. They're useless. Cars that were worth hundreds of dollars were worth $4 the day after it came out because now the cards you couldn't play with anymore. And it forced you to do that. I had friends who owned hobby shops. And when 3rd edition came out, owned by Wizards of the Coast, they would not let you sell 3rd edition books in the store unless you pulled everything 2nd edition off your shelf. It forced people to have to buy 3rd if they wanted to buy any gear. Buy any type of stuff. You had to do that. And so they keep coming out with new stuff, keep getting you to buy more. Then they make the old stuff obsolete. 3, 3.5, 4, and now 5. When's 5.5 or 6 coming out? Who knows at this point? Will it happen? I think they're getting a little bit better about it. But Magic the Gathering is still that way. Still forces you to constantly cycle your cards. So that's the first thing that happened that messed it up. It became more of a profit thing. The second thing that messed it up, Michael nailed the nail on the head right there. Video game generation. We live in a time where people hate limitations. Start with Magic the Gathering again. Play Magic the Gathering when it first came out. You want fireballs and to be able to shoot people, you played red. You want zombies and undead and resurrection, you play black. You want to counterspell people, you play blue. Right? That's how it worked. Now every class has everything. Colors are almost irrelevant. Video games are the same way. You jump into early World of Warcraft. Warriors can do this. You need a healer, you got to have one of these. You need this, you got to have a rogue. And by the time I stopped playing World of Warcraft, I was a warrior who could heal myself almost as well as a healer could. I can only heal myself, but what do I need them for if I can heal myself? You kill players? Right? Does work. Gotta go. Hey, well, it's a pleasure speaking with you, and I appreciate all the help today and stuff. Love that. Loving it. But yeah, so for people, and this is a conversation that's, not just me, but a lot of people I know who've been playing for a very long time, things like Magic and the video World of Warcraft and D&D, because they're all kind of hand in hand in one way or another. It was easy to see all of them take that, Now, World of Warcraft, everybody has a counter spell of some kind, can block a thing. Everybody has an ability to summon a thing. Everybody has a way to heal themselves. No warrior should ever have a way to heal themselves that wasn't created by someone else, like a healing potion or a regeneration ring. No warrior should ever have a natural ability to heal themselves, other than through a super high constitution Wolverine-like healing factor, which exists in 2nd edition. Get your constitution high enough, you get regeneration. I don't know if you do in 5th. In 2nd enough, you can actually get natural regeneration. Not easy. You got to get up it. You got to get it high, and you never gain an ability score by leveling up. The only way you can do that is by finding magical items or magical tomes or things that give you those boosts. But there is no way to gain your ability naturally. But by God, there's a way to lose them. There's monsters out there that'll suck an ability score down in a heartbeat permanently. But yeah, like I said, I still play Magic the Gathering digitally. I won't put money into it. I'm not going to buy a card that 3 months from now I can't use again. That's a waste of money to me. I play the free online version. It's a lot of fun now and again, but even again, I get in there and I'm like, I'm going to create a deck, and I start looking through the cards and I'm like, why are all the good counter spells not in blue? Like, wait, what? That's what blue was for. They were the flyers and they were the counter spells. That's what you had in blue. Now it's everywhere. So Wizards of the Coast has that cycling mentality that continues to get you to buy new things by making old things obsolete and hard to get. Not this thing. I mean, it's a business model, and goddamn, it works. I mean, by the time when Wizards took over, TSR was not doing well. D&D was a dying thing. Wizards brought it back. For that, I can't thank them enough. There's nothing more awesome than to be able to sit down and pull up the news and see some cool-ass celebrity talking about D&D, and proudly that they get to play it, because as much as nerdy folks got picked on for playing D&D and stuff like that, sometimes if you were a relatively cool person who liked that stuff, you didn't get to do it because you were afraid of getting picked. Making it a level playing field where it's cool for anybody to want to do it, especially, and this one's still the struggle that a lot of assholes need to clear out on, which is guys and girls playing together. That type of gatekeeping is infuriating. I'm going to tell you this right now. 99% of the time, I prefer my players to be female. I find them to be better D&D players. That not always. There's exceptions to every rule. You know, I've had a few that weren't good, and I've had some guys who were phenomenal. But historically, the female people who play D&D with me care more about the story and less about min-maxing their character. They're not there to get powerful. They're there to live through the adventure. And I like that. Merged Worlds, 90% of Merged Worlds was 2 ladies, each playing 2 characters, and me. Darsh and Dandy are played by a young lady named Katie, and Mercy and Dandy. No, I'm sorry. Mercy and Dandy were played by Skip, and Darsh and Artemis were played by. My last DM killed 2 parties in 2 weeks. It's a rare day I kill somebody. I'll kill an NPC all day long and break somebody's heart. That's fun. But I try not to. I never plan to kill a character. It can happen. I want it to be a challenge. But I never kill somebody on purpose. What's up, Turtle Man? So I'm better than Jim is what you're saying. I'll let you guys duke that out. Don't pull me under your drama, damn it. But yeah. So I think that to have the most amount of fun playing D&D and to have the most amount of fun bringing you guys D&D content, I genuinely feel playing 2nd edition is going to let me do that the best. It's going to let me worry less about the mechanics and focus more on the fun and the story. Because there's been a lot of times where we're sitting here playing and we get into combat, and the first 15 minutes of combat is us going through the book trying to figure out how to do combat. So second edition, I think. Second edition, half the stuff you need, I have the pages memorized. I've had to open them so many times. Like earlier when I had to pull up saving throws, it's page 101. It's been 101 for 30 years. It's like that's not me being good. That's just me having to open to the same page probably 5,000 times or more in the last 30 years, right? So every time we play, I got to pull up a saving throw for somebody. But there are things in 5th I'm going to continue to read through and look. There are some new spells that didn't exist in 2nd. I'm going to probably put together my own 2nd edition supplement that brings spells and stuff out for that, if you will. Or I could be like, here's a printout of all the spells 5th, but in a 2nd edition format for people who want to use them. I think I would just like to explore the Throbby Pods. You keep your hands off my Throbby Pod, Turtle. But yeah. I think that it will also make more sense because I can explain it better. It lets me take more time out of pulling my mind out of the story in the world and less into the mechanic. And it always sucks when I'm playing D&D with my wife, Jim, and Smashley, and they ask me a question, and I could answer it immediately if it was 2nd edition, but instead I got to spend 10 minutes Googling it because I can't find it in the player's handbook. I do still want to get some of the 5th edition supplement books, though. I don't have a lot of stuff on Ravenloft. There weren't a lot of really good Ravenloft stuff that came out in 2nd edition. It was much later in the 2nd edition cycle that came out. So I'd like to get some of the more modern Ravenloft stuff and dive into that, because I really like Ravenloft stuff. I'd love to have a little Ravenloft section somewhere on Merged Worlds, even though I've never got to do that. And definitely some of the lore and modernization of some of the old, like the we talked about earlier, the Fizban's book, Draconomicon. That would be kind of nice to get a hold of as well. I'd like to see kind of what they've added to dragons. Isn't 5th a lot simpler? No, 5th is horrible, Turtle. I'll be honest with you. And you just came in at the end of it. I started trying to roll a character and learned that in a round, any player This is the part that broke me. Any player, regardless of class, I'm sure race a little bit different with speed, but can run 30 feet in 2 seconds from a standing position, wearing armor, I didn't bring that part up, and gear, maybe a weapon in their hand. They can run 30 feet in 2 seconds and then do more stuff. And that's Olympic level stuff. That's beyond Olympic level stuff. It's just not realistic. And then we talked about people's advantage and extra things. People were able to run 90 feet in 2 seconds. I just can't play D&D with such an absurd concept. I mean, it's a world with magic and monsters and creatures, but if you don't have some slight relevance of reality, it's too hard to stay immersed. Human mind won't let you do it. You can't stay immersed. And that's why those type of things have to exist. There has to be a touch of reality in your... Yeah, that's what we learned. I was looking at a rogue, and I could run like 60 to 90 freaking feet in less than 6 seconds and stab somebody and dodge a hit. In 6 seconds. From a standing position. Even runners have to do that bent over, put their foot against a block thing to run, Olympic races. And they're not doing it with armor on and weapons and scabbards slapping across their legs and ass. Nobody ever talks about empty scabbards, man. I'm telling you, that is something nobody ever thinks about. I'm going to run across this field. That scabbard has no sword in it weighing it down. It's going to be flopping and smacking your legs. You may trip over it. That is not an easy thing to do. Some people are like, I'll strap it to my leg. Well, now you're running with one leg that can't bend at the knee. That's going to slow you down. I had somebody say that once. What if I tie it to my leg? I'd love to see that happen. Yeah, it just doesn't fit from a realistic standpoint. So I'm going to do a 2.5 is the version of D&D I'm going to play. Take 2nd edition, and I'm going to bring in the parts of 5th edition that were an improvement. Like cantrips. It's still my favorite thing to come out of 5th. But let me give you a couple different examples, right? Give you a couple different examples of some things that are different for those of you who may not know anything about 2nd edition. If you are a 2nd edition character, you get to choose weapon proficiencies and non-weapon proficiency. How many points you get to spend in those two charts is based on your class, race, and in some situations, intelligence. So let's just say that we're going to take... let's take the character I was trying to build. A halfling rogue. Simple. Halfling rogue. So, if we go to rogue and we look up weapon proficiencies, let's start with that, which technically it falls under thief, but it's the same thing. 1 second. Thief. Here we go. So, rogue. You get, for your proficiency points, 3 non-weapon proficiency points, plus 1 for every intelligence. In 2nd edition, your intelligence determines how many languages you can speak. If you have a 16 intelligence, you can speak 3 languages. So you get 3 non-weapon proficiencies as a rogue, plus 1 for every language you could speak. 16, I would have 6 non-weapon proficiencies to spend. I can choose from the general chart of non-weapon proficiency or the rogue chart, because I'm a rogue. Most proficiencies cost 1 point. There's a couple that cost 2. You can buy one from the priest, warrior, or wizard chart, but you have to add an additional point to the cost. People don't do that. So just to give you a feel for when you're designing your characters, right? You had skills here, right? So I looked at the skills that I could choose from. As a rogue, there were 6 or 7 of them. And I chose acrobatics, athletics, sleight of hand, and stealth. Now, I didn't get far enough to learn if I get to learn any more of those skills later in the game, but I did get to make those skills better, which is okay. And those are the skills that I have. As a first edition rogue, I could choose 6 non-weapon proficiency points, and I'll read off just the ones that cost 1 point. You get to choose out of this: agriculture, animal handling, animal training, artistic ability, blacksmithing, brewing, carpentry, cobbling, cooking, dancing, direction sense, etiquette, fire building, fishing, heraldry, modern languages, leatherworking, mining, pottery, riding land-based, riding air-based, cost 2, rope use, seamanship, seamstress, tailor, singing, stonemasonry, swimming, weather sense, or weaving. That's the general section. As a rogue, I also have the choice of choosing ancient history, appraising, disguise, forgery, gaming, juggling, jumping, local history, musical instrument, set snares, tightrope walking, tumbling, and ventriloquism. So from a customization standpoint, 2 people in the party could roll a halfling rogue, same intelligence, and have absolutely no skills in common, bringing something completely different to the table. And I get another point every 3 levels. Wizards start with more, but they get less weapon points. Warriors are down the middle. And then paladins, priests, the same type of combination. So I get to choose those, and that's not counting from the other 10 or 12 books I have with additional ones, like the Thieves' Handbook, the Tome of Magic, and all of these books have additional ones that we can add over time that I already know, so I can point people towards cool ones. Ventriloquism is great, man. I've used ventriloquism as a rogue so many times. Here's a great one. If you have a whip proficiency and you take rope use, you can start doing Indiana Jones stuff with that. Swinging from things, grabbing people's feet, whipping them out. Artemis has a whip. I rarely bring that up in the adventure as much. That's one of the few things Artemis can do that's badass. There's been so many times where she's whipping somebody, doing minimal damage, and then someone's running it at Dandy, who maybe is down or something. Artemis just reaches up, rips him around the back of the neck and yanks. I mean, as long as they're not bigger and stronger than her, that's fine. She might have a chance of doing that. That's cool, because she took those 2 simple skills. And when you look at something like brewing, well, what good is brewing? You can make some damn good alcohol from there. But it also gives perks to other things, like creating potions, salves, and things. So a priest or a wizard who might want to make potions, brewing gives you an additional chance to make better ones. There's a lot of combinations and silly things like animal handling, animal training, riding land-based. If you don't have that, you don't know how to ride a horse. You don't take swimming, you don't know how to swim. That's how it works. Unless it comes naturally with your race. If you're Sea Elf, you don't have to pick swimming. Weapons work the exact same way. As a rogue, I get to start with 2 weapon proficiencies, and I gain another one every 4 levels. So I pick 2 weapons of my choice. All right, cool. Short sword and dagger. I'm done. I can use a short sword. I can use a dagger. I can use any other weapon I ever pick up, but with a -2 penalty. Because I'm not trained with it. And that's it. Every few levels, I've learned to make a new weapon or use a new weapon. And a lot of times as a DM working with my players, we try to make the learning of that part of the story, right? Maybe you're traveling with an NPC who knows how to use a whip. You think it's cool, you'd like to use a whip. Over the last 3 months of adventuring, on off time, they've taught you to use the whip. Now you've hit 4th level, you buy the whip ability, it's assumed you've learned it from someone. You can work that into the story so well. But there's a ton of stuff like that, where like a wizard picking up a weapon they don't know how to use gets a -5. Warrior gets a -2. I'm sorry, priests and rogues get a -3. So the negative you get as a warrior who's just naturally better with weapons. Warriors get 4 points to start with and are the only class that can specialize. So as a proficiency, I pick a weapon. That means I know how to use it without a negative. A warrior can do the same thing, but a warrior can put another point in it to specialize. And now it becomes a +1/+2. Means I get +1 to attack and a +2 to damage anytime I use those swords, and that is cumulative with any magical bonus that comes from that weapon. Because I'm a warrior, I'm a fighter, that's what I do. I know how to use a longsword really good. The rogue knows how to use a longsword, but he also knows how to do all these thieves skills. He had to divide his time in school, whatever, to learn all this stuff, but not me. I spent 8 hours a day to learn how to use this longsword. I'm better with it than he'll ever be. I use an alternative thing where you can continue to put points into it if you want, and it increases the attack bonus. You're always going to do the same amount of damage. A sword's going to do eventually a certain amount of damage. Put another point in it, I've got a +2/+2, 3/+2, +4/+2, so on. Because you get another point every 3 levels. The other classes just get to no longer have the negative. That's a perk of being a warrior. Because there's not a lot of them in a lot of ways, you know. Now, ranged is the only difference. Ranged, you can't put into it more than once, but you automatically get a +2/+2 with a bow or a crossbow if you take ranged as your specialization. So there's that. But again, weapons, you can usually choose, unless you're a mage who can only choose from a very limited amount of weapons, whip, dagger, dart, staff, sling. Priests, they're going to be limited based on what god they worship. But rogues and warriors aren't limited to any weapon. They can take any damn weapon in the game they want, as long as they put their point into it. So that's just an example of how you can customize characters. And that's just part of it. But when I look at that, or I'm told to pick 4 out of this list of 6, and that's the only 4 I'm ever going to get to pick out of, that's disappointing to me. Sure, they'll get better down the road. And you can do the same thing with non-weapon proficiencies. If you want to be better at a skill, you can just go ahead and put another point in it. And because each one, like say for example, I put swimming. It'll say next to swimming, strength/0, which means I have to make a strength check, 0 modifier. I just got to roll under my strength. Under my strength. The higher my strength is, the easier it is for me to succeed. The stronger I get, the more numbers I can roll to be successful. Don't need a modifier. Roll under my strength. If I have a step that's wisdom -3, that's good. That's a good thing. Because I roll it and I get to -3 from what I roll. So if my wisdom's 15, I got to roll under 15. I roll a 16, but I get to subtract 3 from it. I roll a 13. It's the same as the proficiencies you have now, except it's a little bit flipped. For a plus, you have to add that to your dice, which makes it more challenging. I have a +2 to this, which means I have to add 2 to whatever I roll, but I want to roll under a 15. The D20 system, the goal was to always make it roll over. Second edition, it doesn't. Some things you roll over, some things you roll under. There is a little bit more math when combat comes in, but you can prefigure it out. So that way, all I have to do is, just like in second edition, I say armor class 6. I look at my paper, I know I have to roll this number or higher. The same thing. A little bit of math when you're first putting down your weapons, but once you jot them down, it answers it all for you. You're done. Which, for the record, Jim and Ashley, I will show you guys how to do that next time. We will probably spend half of next time converting character sheets. But yeah, there's a lot of fun little skills in there. That'll be a lot of fun. But at the same time, again, there are things in 5th I came across that I did like. So some of that stuff I am going to be bringing. Cantrips being the very first one. I know I just keep saying that, but it's my favorite thing. But there are some other things in there that I like. As for the whole background thing and giving you skills, that doesn't exist. You pick your background. You tell me what kind of background you want to have, and then you get to pick out of that huge list of skills the one that goes with the background you've decided for you. just picking out of 6 of them and figure it out. Clerics have some challenges only because of they have to weapon limitation, armor limitation, and spell limitation. Wizards have it the worst. Well, wizards are easy, they're just hard to play. You get 1 weapon point, can't wear any armor, you can cast 1 spell at first level. The cantrips will make a world of difference to them. But you play a battle mage, that's a kit in 2nd edition. That's some fun. A battle mage is where the war wizards from Mercy's kingdom come from. They're a little bit designed not on that a little bit. A pure battle mage uses swords and everything too. But a battle mage is kind of the concept that I turned Mercy's war wizards. Is a growing thing in Mergedworlds where Serenity's the face of it. Michael says 3.5 is less of a drastic change from 2, but still rollover. Yeah, it is. And I looked at some of that when it first came out. 3, I'm sorry, not 3.5, but 3. Really didn't like what I saw in 3, so I didn't bother with it. Then 3.5 came out, people said it was better. But I was still nervous. I don't think so. And then 4th came out, and I heard nothing but bad stuff. And I'm like, I'm just going to stick with 2nd. It's working. Everybody I play with prefers it to whatever they've learned in other groups anyways. So we're just going to stick with it. And then 5th came out, and I assumed it was going to be the exact same thing. At least, in my opinion, it is. But 5th is stuck. 5th, most people seem to really like. And I think a large part of that is because a large part of the player base now is people who've picked up D&D since 3.5 or 4. If you started playing in 4, 5th is a hell of an upgrade, even from what I've seen. And, you know, I hate to say it that way. You love 5th because you don't know any better. You haven't played any of the other versions earlier than that. Some people have, like Michael played 3.5, and some people have played 2nd and things. But most people who play a homebrew 2nd, because again, there is some trash in here. Encumbrance in 2nd edition is miserable. Not only is it miserable to do and understand, it just sucks the fun out of playing. Encumbrance should be common sense. No, you can't carry an anvil in your backpack. No, you can't carry 10 longswords in your backpack. No, you can't carry 10,000 gold pieces. Where are you putting 10,000 gold pieces? That's too damn heavy. Gold is heavy. Even if it's coins, you have a chest, you got to add the weight of a chest to it. Where are you putting 10,000 gold pieces? So as you're getting money, you got to find a place to have them. And as a DM, I am all about making sure that everybody has a way to keep the stuff they want. It is not going to be too far into a story before a group is going to find at least 1 or 2 bags or something of holding. The chest of holding being the perfect example of that. There are many different bags of holding. Hayward's Handy Haversack, bag of holding, sack of holding, pouch of holding. There are a lot of holding things you can get a hold of to help you carry more stuff conveniently. I don't want you to worry about, oh, I can only carry 356 gold, but I have 522. 2nd edition encumbrance is set up to calculate like that. And that's just too much to me. Common sense, right? Can I carry 500 gold? Yeah. Can I carry 5,000? Probably not. You need to find a way to do it. Or buy a 5,000 gold piece gem from somebody. You can carry that around. It's easier to hide. Stick it in your navel if you're a chunky person. Stick it right up in there. No. But that's, in my opinion, when it comes to that, encumbrance is a perfect example of why people want a house, or a mage tower, or a castle, or a thieves' den. People need a place to keep their stuff. Because the longer you adventure, the more cool stuff you can get. And eventually, you're going to go into a castle or a tomb, and you're going to find some money and some magic items, and a beautiful tapestry of a dragon battle worth 10,000 gold pieces. You'll sell that, or you can hang it in your keep. There are a lot of cool magical chairs. You're not going to carry a magical chair around with you, but it'd be cool to have it in your mage tower. you know? So there's a lot of that. To me, that type of stuff, the desire to have things, but now I have more than I can carry, will start to push characters into finding a house. Give you one last example before we end this. Just a second to find it. I think some of you will get a kick out of this. Toes, kite. Kingdom of Kite. I may have it in the back of Kingdom of Kite. See this? See these? Floor plans for 1, 2, and 3-story level homes. I've got about 400 of them here. Some of them are the same, some of them are different. If I'm playing D&D and somebody's like, hey, we're living in this town or we're going to be questing around this area, Paxawal, the heroes bought a house. Let's buy you a house. Doesn't mean you're going to live there forever. Later on, you might build a castle, build your mage tower. You're a rogue, you get your own little thieves' den under the city somewhere. Doesn't mean you can't buy a house early, have a place to stash stuff. Trap it. Build hidden passageways to hide your treasure. But that's what the characters did. It all came from that. The Kingdom of Kite is a D&D adventure that I wrote, that I ran another group through, that technically is on Mergedworlds, but it's never part of it. None of it connected to the story at all. It was actually a bit of a mystery. It's an entire thing. See, these are the fancy homes. These are different adventures and things. There's maps to sewers, and this is the sewer map in the city, because they're part of the thing. You had to go down into the sewers. I did a lot of Excel document stuff back in the day. How much gold does it take to buy a basic house versus a big house? A lot of that's going to depend on where you are, right? Say there's a small village that you like and you want to buy or even have. These can also be built, for the way. You could be like, this is the floor plan I want. I'd like to have it built here. You can do that. Small village and such. Maybe cheaper, maybe a little bit more expensive to build, but cheaper to buy. Expensive to build because it's harder to get the materials. You walk into Paxawal or something like that. Normally, you're going to say, I'd like a house in this section. I'm going to pull 4 or 5 of them out. I'm going to say, these ones are for sale. This is how much each one of these is. And you can look at that. You can look at the ones that are available in that city. And most people don't mind picking one of those because it's not going to be their end game. When Mercy and Darsh and Artemis bought the house in Paxawal, Darsh knew he wanted an island. Mercy knew she wanted a kingdom. This was a temporary thing. So they just wanted something that was kind of cool that they could put their valuables in and stuff. And especially once they got the rings of central teleportation that let them port home, they needed a place to keep the obelisks that were safe that they could port back. That gave me the opportunity to bring Molly into the story. And Molly became a huge NPC. She was never intended. They asked, can we get a house? I said, sure, let me draw up some houses. That week, I came back with several hundred, because back then I had a job that I really hated, and I worked third shift, and I had access to a computer all night, and I didn't do my job. So I spent all night working on D&D stuff. But the cost can be from even just a couple hundred gold for a small home in a small village to several thousand for a 3-story home in a nice section of Paxawal. It just kind of depends on what you're looking for. And I like to have, you don't get to go through and pick every house. I'll say, these are the 5 that are available in this city. You could buy one, you'd be like, we'll keep traveling. Get to the next city. Which ones are available here? I pull these ones out. Gives you a chance to do some house shopping, just like in real life. Almost passed on the gold today, because at some point, you run out of place to carry it. That's very correct, Michael. That's exactly it. And that's the thing I said. If you want to live in the common area versus the wealthy area, or the slums, the house you get in the slums could still be a nice house, but it's in a rough section of town. You leave all your goods and valuables in there while you're out traveling, there's a much higher chance you're going to come home to that stuff missing. At the same time, you buy it in a wealthy section. There's more guards there. There's more city guards because they protect the wealthy more. That's how every world works, including ours. So there's going to be more protection in that area. Less, robberies will still happen there, but now they're big heists. You know what I mean? But by that point, you're usually pretty well off enough that you've got a rogue in your party who can trap it. Maybe you've got a wizard who can cast some booby trap spells. There's ways for you to protect your home. You can even, in like Paxawal, early on, because they didn't have a wizard, they paid the mage tower. They went like, we need our home to be protected while we're gone, and paid good money to have mages come over and cast protection spells on their home, so that if anyone tried to go in it alerted the mage tower. It was almost like an alarm system. There was different things that they did that way. It was their idea. Hey, can we pay a mage to do this? We worked out how to make it work. And that was before Darsh and Dandy hand-built the hidden room in the basement. Darsh dug it out. Dandy helped design it. They built it themselves with supplies they slowly brought in and built the false wall. But that was one of those things that they did. I want to say we spent half of an 8-hour gaming session just working on their house when they first, and they were having a blast. They didn't have anything in it. We get beds? Sure. Can I get a canopy bed? Yeah. What color canopy you want? Ooh, you have red ones? Sure. You can go to any seamstress. They can make you the red canopy. Okay. I want a 4-post bed with a canopy. All right. Cool. This is the living room. Yeah. Does it have anything in it? No. Can we get a couch? What kind of couch you want? Can we get a sectional? Expensive. How expensive? I mean, it's things like that. It was one of those things like, they get back from an adventure and they're like, well, we found 20 gold pieces worth of silverware, knives, forks, and spoons. I'm not going to sell these. I'm going to put these in the silverware drawer, wash them off, and that was now their cooking utensils. We don't have to buy silverware now. You know, I found a gold bowl. I'm going to stick that over here as an art piece. Then they sold a lot of that before they moved to Serenity. But, you know, at early game, it was fun for them to do that. Like you find an expensive rug. Can we get it in the chest of holding? Yeah, if you roll it up, man, that's going to look amazing in the living room. Sure enough, brought that rug home, slapped it down in the living room. In fact, in the episode where Artemis comes down and Draven's sitting in the living room and makes her the offer of giving her the necklace for the first time, there was a comment about, he's like, excellent, it's good to speak to you. Might I say you have a lovely home? I really like this rug. Like, it was just one of those little callbacks that made them laugh. Well, Draven was like, you have a very lovely home. I really like this rug. So it's kind of stuff. You do it offline? Well, all of us, we only played at home. We never played online. We only played at my house. So all of it was technically offline. It was a lot of fun. So, that's the type of stuff I like to bring into my groups. I can guarantee, I feel bad saying it, that my D&D group, Jim, Smashley, and my wife, I think they have fun playing D&D. They're going to have more fun if we make this switch. Because it's going to be a lot easier for me to put more story in there and less time trying to figure out how to make stuff. So I'm excited about that. So for those of you who are really excited for me to figure out 5th, I apologize. Man, I just don't like it. I've been trying for months. You guys know I've been trying. So, still a pretty box set. I'm glad I bought it. Love the art. And I'm sure I'll be able to use the monster manual. There's a lot of really, really nice monsters and monster details that aren't in some of the monster manuals that I have. So, one of my favorite things about the 5th edition monster manual, man, it's got a page that shows you what the rocks look like that giants are going to throw. Like, it legit says, this is the type of rock this giant would throw. This is the type. That was, to me, I was like, what an awesome little flair. When I was looking at the Dungeon Master Guide yesterday, and it showed what the ends of different wands and swords look like. That's phenomenal detail that just didn't exist in 2nd. So there's definitely going to be magic items and such that I found in there that we didn't have before that I'll use. So there's still stuff I'll be picking out of 5th edition. I'm just going to move. I've always called my version 2.5. It's right. I've taken 2 and converted into what I want to do. So that's why I laughed earlier when I said it, because I've never used it on the channel before. But basically, I'm going to bring it back to 2.5 and just bring in more 5th edition stuff. Hell, I've got a few things I brought in from World of Warcraft that I thought were cool enough that I managed to find a way to work them into D&D. So talk about that sometime. Well, we've been going for almost 3 hours. It's probably time for me to call this. I have to work tomorrow, and I still have my migraine. I'm going to get some rest tonight. But thanks for coming and listening to me go on and on and on and on today. I don't know if I feel like I ever talked about anything helpful with anybody. I just think I went on rants for most of the day. So hopefully you found this to be a good episode. I still had fun. I had a blast talking about stuff and working things out and kind of making some decisions there. The early stuff about the half-breed characters, the half-blooded characters, was really had a lot of fun chatting about that as well. So that's cool. Yeah. So next Thursday is normally Merged Worlds. Next Thursday is also Thanksgiving here in the United States. My goal is to still do Merged Worlds. We're usually home by 8 o'clock for my wife's family, but on the off chance we don't make it back, I may have to post during the day, hey guys, I won't be able to have it tonight. I'm going to plan on having it at this point. I also expect with it being a Thanksgiving, a lot of you folks may not be able to come, so it may be just 2 hours of me speaking to myself, so I guess we'll see. But the next episode of Merged Worlds is going to be the last episode of the current storyline. And then there's going to be a couple snippets, reading snippets, that's going to set up the next one. And then 2 weeks after will be the first one of what I'm going to consider the main storyline that's going to be proceeding forward for a while. Or as like I referred to it to some people today, that's when the shit will hit the proverbial fan. And I get to really, really move into something I've been looking forward to, and I've been writing for a very long time. So I'm excited to finally get into this big chunk of the story. So thank you all very much for coming. If you're watching this today, tomorrow, or 10 years down the road, it would be awesome if you'd consider subscribing to the channel. As well as if you also don't mind, throw a like on there. It helps out way more than you think. If you had a good time, I'd appreciate it. I get at least one dislike on every Behind the Dice and every Merged Worlds now. I've made somebody angry. Today I slammed fifth a lot, so I'm thinking I may get some downvotes from people who really like fifth, but you can't please anybody. I am almost never pleased. But I had a great time. Tomorrow I'll be back over on Twitch, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, doing some Minecraft Sky Magic Islands. Saturday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern is Colonel Gaming's in my duo stream of 7 Days to Die. Would love to have you for that one. One of my favorite streams of the week. And then Sunday night, I'll be back here on YouTube at 9:30 for Minecraft Sky Factory 1. So lots of stuff coming up. If you aren't following me over on my Discord yet, Onlydraven Gaming is the name there. All one word, no underscore, no space, just Onlydraven Gaming. I'd love to have you over there as well. We have a lot of fun stuff going on. But thank you very much for coming to my TED Talk rant pity party. I don't know. But I appreciate that you came and did it with me. And I hope you all have yourselves a very wonderful rest of your week and a great weekend. Okay? Thank you so much for hanging out.